What is a Chiari malformation? A Chiari malformation is a congenital birth defect of the brain, which basically means I was born with it. I'm a visual learner, so to help you understand a little bit better, here's a picture of my most recent MRI. This is a side view of the bottom of my brain and the top part of my spine if I were sliced right down the middle. If you look to the right, you can see the cerebellum, which is the back part of the brain. Right in front of that is the brainstem, which turns into the spinal cord directly below that. In front of it is the white part called the cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF. In front of that, you'll see where I've labeled the front part of the spine. Here's a closer up picture. You can see the brainstem and the back of the brain directly behind it. You can also see the base of skull that I've labeled here. And then there's a dotted line, which represents the foramen magnum, or the big hole where the brainstem continues and turns into the spinal cord. When the cerebellar tonsils, the bottom part of the cerebellum, sag into the spinal canal, that is referred to as a Chiari malformation. So what happens when the cerebellar tonsils descend into the spinal canal? Well, number one, it pushes the brainstem from behind. Number two, it can plug up the passageway of cerebrospinal fluid from the brain down into the spine. Cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, is a liquid that acts to protect the brain and the spinal cord from the bones around it and the activities of everyday life. It kind of works like shock absorbers do in sneakers. If you look in the picture, you'll see the bluish purplish color around the spinal cord. This is the CSF. If you look on the picture in the right, you'll see that the cerebellar tonsils plug the passageway of the CSF. So what happens then when the cerebellar tonsils plug up the passageway and the CSF is stuck in the brain? It causes higher intracranial pressure because the brain is now accumulating fluid that should be flowing down the spine. You know how sometimes when you're driving in the mountains, or if you're taking off in an airplane, or when you're landing, you kind of have this pressure build up in your ears and you have to chew gum or just pretend to chew in order to relieve that pressure? Well, imagine that feeling, only instead of in your ears, it's in your brain. And unlike the pressure that builds in your ears, there's nothing that you can do to relieve it. That's exactly what happens when you have higher intracranial pressure. Common symptoms of Kyary and high intracranial pressure include headache and neck pain, pain and pressure behind the eyes, clamping feeling on the temples like someone's put a vice grip on it, choking, weakness in your arms and in your legs, dizziness or balance issues, tinnitus or ringing in ears. It could sound like a high-pitched noise or either like a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sound. Please note that this is not a complete exhaustive list and may not accurately represent the symptoms of all Kyary patients. One common complication in Kyary patients is known as syringomyelia. When the cerebellar tonsils cut off the flow of CSF from the brain to the spinal canal, it backs up. The brain is continually making new CSF, and so it has to go somewhere. In patients with syringomyelia, a fluid-filled sac begins to grow within the spinal cord itself. This is called a syrinx. As it grows and elongates, it permanently damages the nerves within the spinal cord itself. If you look at the image to your right, you can see the purple sac within the spinal cord.